Good morning, fellas. And once again, Steve, thank you for that really appropriate um, benediction that we used as a um, invocation. And it fits very, very nicely. Thank you. We're in our study of John, which you're fully aware, John 2021. We are in that transition of which we just heard through the chorus. And the uh, the transition from Jesus being bodily present, which is the encounter throughout the gospel accounts, to now moving into what we experience today as um, a reality where Christ is present through the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit. And from here forward, that will be reflected throughout the remainder of the New Testament and by the New Testament writers, of which I have spent a great deal of time thinking about in correlating the gospel accounts, this transitional period, and what faith looked like as reflected through the New Testament writers. And and that's where we're at. So right now we're at a post-resurrection appearance. Jesus has now entered the night of the resurrection, has entered into the lockdown room where the disciples are present, and the first words out of his mouth is "Peace be with you." And I think that is so appropriate. We're going to see it again. The reason Jesus is saying, "Peace be with you," is because what he has come to accomplish, he's accomplished. There's nothing left, only to embrace it for ourselves, for themselves and ourselves personally. It is done. And what I observe around me, that is not the case in our society and much of our church experience. But it doesn't nullify the truth of what is. Jesus has done what Jesus has come to do. And as a result, he speaks from that truth into the lives of the disciples, and we'll enter in that today. The segment of chapter 20, verse 21 through 23 is one narrative, but there are three movements within that narrative of Jesus. In my Bible, the red letter, Jesus is speaking. So we're going to analyze each of those movements. We'll look at the first this morning. It's the word send. And the text reads, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And this morning, our goal is to ask, what does this mean? In my earlier journey as a follower of Jesus, of course, I'm looking back into the early 70s. The whole sending idea was taken out of Matthew 28. I send you into the world, the Great Commission. This is not a counter to the Great Commission, but it's an augmentation of the Great Commission. In the world I was in at that day, we understood the Great Commission in one way, primarily one way. I want to be fair, and that is we are sinners. Jesus came to pay the penalty to God so God could forgive us. Jesus paid that penalty, and we need to accept that work that Jesus has done on our behalf. And our mission as a church was go out and tell other people. Now, that's kind of a simplistic approach, but that was really what I cut my teeth on. What we're going to look at here is another aspect of that Great Commission from the Gospel of John, as Jesus is now preparing his disciples to move out with his presence taking on a different form. We read the text, and it says, from verse 21, Jesus said to them, the disciples, there it is the second time, peace be to you. Just as the Father has sent me, I also send you. Throughout John's gospel, Jesus initiates. Now we're going to look at the 30,000-foot view here, and I went through the gospel account, all 21 chapters, and I started to identify common denominators of what Jesus initiated. And I I placed them as bullet points here in the slide. Jesus gathers disciples. We see that early on in the book. Jesus gathers the excluded. He was the one seeking the excluded one, as we see the mission and the ministry of Jesus. He's broadly gathering humanity into a shared sonship. That's the language he uses. He specifically talks about my Father and your Father. And then in John, I should know that, 18, that they may be one. The vine and the branches, that could be a little bit earlier. The vine and the branches out of John 15. He refers to himself as the shepherd gathering the sheep. And if he is lifted up, Christ will draw all humanity to himself. That is the general, we could phrase this other ways, but this, I think if we looked at the text, would be a pretty fair rendition of what Jesus initiates within John's gospel account. Now there's a flip side. Well, before I go to the flip side, his direction, here's my summary statement. His direction is always toward union and participation. It would be hard to come up with anything else within John's gospel account, and I think also in concert with the other three gospels. His direction is always towards union and participation. Now we go to the flip side. On the other side of the line, by contrast, Jesus enters a world of his day, first century, and it is one that is characterized by self-protection, which produces fragmentation. There was an expression of faith, there's no doubt. But I find it hard to find occasion where Jesus is endorsing the common expression of faith as through religious practice. He endorses faith, but it's out of a I think in every case, it is in a non accepted way coming from a very surprising individual. But the expression of faith was well established at those times, and I see Jesus within the gospel account as primarily critical of that expression of faith. And Jesus is entering that world. His primary purpose is not being a critic, pointing out what's wrong. His primary objective is pointing to people to life. And here is the world he enters. It's characterized in the text immediately as locked rooms. And of course, that's a metaphor for something larger. There's a definite tribalism that exists. accusation, the tribalism is the idea of being those who are the haves and those who are the have-nots. Good morning, Carl.
Morning.
There is accusations. There is purity boundaries. Purity is a huge um, piece uh, to the world he enters within the expression of faith. I should say the expression of faith within the world he enters. There is insider, there it is. I didn't know I put that in there. Insider, outsider thinking. That would be um, a way of talking about tribalism. Now we take um, these two very different expressions of faith. And so, what we see now in the post resurrection of Jesus, on the evening of the resurrection, Jesus appears with inside the locked room. And I think that is a beautiful metaphor of God with us, Emmanuel. God continues to be with us within the locked rooms of our experience. Immediately, and within that locked room, he immediately commissions humanity as disciples towards a reconnection, a coming together versus a separation exemplified by fear. It's here that Jesus defines the mission of the church. There's where I say this is an augmentation to the Great Commission out of Matthew 28, because what is true of his words to the disciples, we can directly apply to for us being in the church, part of the church, for us today. The church is not sent to replace Jesus like I did. We don't have the language, I did my job, now you do yours. That is really not the case at all. It is, I am with you, you in me, I in you. And he addresses the Father, I think in John 17, and they in us. It is unmistakably, it is a continuation of Jesus, as the chorus stated this morning. And so, if that's true, we need to ask, first of all, if you and I are being sent, there is a commission, yes. And if our commission is in reflection exactly as Jesus was sent, which is what the verse indicates, we need to ask, first of all, how was Jesus sent? What does that mean? John answers this way. And I have my first diagram, first or image. Within the image, the world that Jesus steps into, representing by the open hands, as Jesus is looking into the context that he's stepping into, the world that he steps into is in conflict over here. The world he steps into is a walking away, a separateness, a moving away rather than a stepping together and stepping forward. And of course, in the far background, there is destruction that is occurring in numerous ways all around us. So, the world that Jesus is stepping into, what he's being sent into, that's the context in the image. That is the arena he's being stepped into. And within that, he's being asked to seek, to gather, to reveal the Father. This is all words right from the text itself. To heal division, as here, to enter the human experience, which is actually the entire image, and to restore communion. His prayer his high priestly prayer in John 17 in the upper room is, Father, that they may be one as we are one. It's I don't think we can get around that one. It is to be one. So within that, as we've already looked at, or as an introduction, the two different expressions, what has emerged through John's account are the two contrary expressions of faith, which we introduced prior, a little deeper here. I've named that what Jesus expressed and what Jesus entered, and those two terms should be familiar with you. On the left-hand side, we see Jesus expressing entering. Jesus is always moving towards conflict, difficulty, pain, suffering. Jesus is seen as listening. Jesus is seen as reconciling. Jesus is seen as gathering. Jesus is seen as expressing or restoring. Jesus bears wounds without retaliation, and that is the cross. On the right-hand side, the world he enters, it's about protecting boundaries. And the boundaries most criticized within the text itself are the religious boundaries created by the human, the human mindset, the human narrative. It is a world that separates primarily through differences. It is a world that is characterizes. And what I mean by that, it profiles people into ins and outs. Who is worthy? Who is unworthy? It is a world that is exemplified through exclusion. There is violence within that exclusion, and there is baptized exclusion that we experience in the church by someone holding a different view and being excluded because of that view. There are controls that we need to manage. We need to monitor people's experiences. We need to ask people to line up to how we think they should be. That's the world Jesus entered. And it's a world that fears contamination. The idea of I need to stand up for God. God is moving and I need to get on board. I view the other as contaminated, and I need to protect myself and my family from that contamination. These things are real. They're real in the first century, and they couldn't be more real in today's experience. On the left-hand side, I have summarized the left column as Jesus as the gatherer. Gatherer, a verb. He is about gathering, a bringing together. And I've taken the liberty to come up with one word that would exemplify how Jesus was sent. He was sent to be a gatherer. And on the right-hand side, the one word that I've come up with that exemplifies the world he entered, it is a world of separateness. And it only makes sense that the incarnation, the God in flesh, is observing a world of separateness. And because God is love and God loves what God creates, Jesus is there as the incarnate God to take separateness and induce gathering. Thus, in John 17, that they may be one as we are one. So we ask the question then, if Jesus is the gatherer, uh, verb, well, that's a noun, but he is gathering, there's the verb. What does a gatherer look like? Because we are being sent, while the disciples were being sent as he was sent. He was sent as a gatherer. We've attempted to answer that question. And we are then extrapolating that truth to you and I as we also are a gatherer, or to be a gatherer in a verb sense. Our intention is to gather. I think if we had time, we could. I'd like to hear from you. We got time. I'm going to go into a series of 8 images of how gathering looks in various aspects of life. But before I do that, I'd like to hear what you guys think a gatherer looks like. What is the image from your own experience of people in your life who you view as a gatherer? What would that look like? And I know this is off the cuff, but what are some words, descriptive words that come to mind? And you don't have to be profound.
A couple of words come to mind. Oh,
Go ahead.
a couple of words come to mind. One is, well, maybe it's a phrase,
Yeah.
loving before seeing change.
Wow. Yeah. And that's certainly exemplified by Jesus. Yeah. Loving before, that is really good, Steve. Loving before seeing change. Yeah. That's great. Carl, were you going to say something?
Well, being I was a little bit late, I was trying to play catch up and take notes at the same time and also listen. The gatherer, would that word gatherer be substituted as a leader?
It certainly could be. I think leaders can exemplify gathering. That's for certainly true.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
I don't know how, yeah.
Yeah. Thank
How
you.
about
Yeah.
how about a listener?
There you go. Right.
I was what inspired that was I just observed some work of the Stevens ministers in our church.
Yeah. Hmm. I think the Stevens ministry, I've never taken the training, but I would assume the word listening has something to do with how they're trained.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
There are a lot of people that are lonely, and bearing huge burdens.
yeah.
Somebody to come alongside them.
We have heard the word listen. Um, we have we have identified the idea of leadership as fitting into that. When Carl talks of leadership, I'm assuming what you mean as initiating movement as a primary source in a direction that is whatever that direction is. It could be meeting a budget, or it could be moving towards a cause, a benevolent cause. But leadership is taking the action to step forward when that action is not occurring in a direction. And certainly gathering is a piece of that.
Yeah, gathering would be really a substantial piece of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And in our own experience, we've seen leadership that demonstrates that and leadership that does not demonstrate that.
Robert mentioned the listening. I think that's something that a gatherer does. He listens a lot. He takes the time to listen.
Right. Yeah. As I think about my own life and people who have impacted me, the three things that Steve talked about: loving before seeing change. And that is huge. That is the idea of unconditional acceptance, regardless, free to love the other, regardless of their performance. And that is so true. And these three that we've heard are all seen in the person of Jesus. We could identify story after story where we've seen those three demonstrated. So thank you, guys. Let's move on and let's look at. I've identified 8 kind of randomly areas where I think there is need today. Not to decipher or distinguish today from yesterday, but these 3 out of a whole smattering, I chose these 8. And the reason I chose 8 is because they fit nicely on the last slide. So that's why. So we'll look at those. What does a gatherer look like? The first one that comes to mind is family tension, something we all know and have all experienced. I don't know of anybody who has not experienced, in some regard, family tension. And the question on the table is, and we'll discuss this. If you want to say something, feel free to say something, but we'll look at these once we go through them. What does being a gatherer look like in the context of family tension? That is should be close to home for all of us. The second slide is, what does a gatherer look like within a little broader perspective, our church disagreements? As I was explaining earlier before the presentation, we're going through a very difficult time. The word disagreement hasn't really come up. We're not fighting over some sort of doctrinal issue by any means, but the church as a whole is really experiencing pain in a very real sense. I think that the common feeling is we don't know how to talk about it. And that is often the case within a community. We don't know, and also in a family, we just don't know what to say. And so we continue on within our pain. We see Jesus engaging and initiating people who are in pain in a very wonderful way. Numerous stories. What does a gatherer look like within political differences? There is so much polarization, and this image is very clear of that polarization now in the forefront. The pointed finger, the red attire, and the colored hair really represents the political differences that we are experiencing. And it's primarily about shouting, about name calling, that leads to violence? How does a gatherer, what does a gatherer look like within that context? And Bob mentioned loneliness. That is so true. And I think it's so much a part of our culture. In the day that we are connected like in no other day, there loneliness is epidemic everywhere we go. People are lonely, and it's sad. We're built for community. What does a gatherer look like within a world of loneliness? What does a gatherer look like in aging? We are all in the same boat here. We're all experiencing this. And how do we, how do we navigate aging? By the way, this is a total aside, but I'm reading Jim Collins's current book on what to do with a life. I deeply respect Jim Collins. You guys probably know his name through the book Good to Great. It was out about 25 years ago. But I have really enjoyed that book, would highly recommend this book as a read. And it talks about this kind of thing, moving into these, not entirely about aging. It's not a book about aging, but it's a book about life and great stories. But aging, and how does a gatherer look within the context of aging? What does a gatherer look like in shame? This one is with us through all generations. And shame is absolutely huge. And unfortunately, shame itself tends to keep us from the very life that has been given to us. Shame. And what does a gatherer look like in this regard? We have two more. Here, I kind of dialed it out to more of the common world we live in, whether it's Safeway or Lucky's um, or King Supers or Ace Hardware, one of my favorite places. It's all what does a gatherer look like? Boy, each of these could be a discussion in themselves. What does a gatherer look like within the grocery store? And the last one is, what does a gatherer look like within the workplace? We're all beyond that point now. Well, Bob's working by choice because he absolutely loves it and he loves what he does, and that's wonderful. But within that workplace, whatever our workplace would be, either a conventional or non-conventional, what does a gather look like? So from here, we move to the table time, and I've given you guys 8 slides, 8 prompters to think about. I didn't list the names here, but the family, church, political, loneliness, aging, shame, grocery, or our day-to-day being out there, and then in our formal workplace. The idea of being a gatherer. If we look at Jesus, this was how he was sent. Not inclusive of everything, but there are 8 aspects that are very real, and we see Jesus functioning as a gatherer within all of these. And the text reads in verse 21, he is being sent into these very places, into these avenues. And so are we. And if we are sent, I'd love to hear, we would love to hear, what does it look like to be what I'm labeling as a gatherer? Because I think that is a good term to attach to Jesus. So as you think about being a gatherer, which area captures your attention? As I was going through those, feel free to pick an image and just talk about it. And I think we'd all value what you have to say. So feel free to take the microphone.
So Mike, when I think of a gather, when we were talking about it earlier, coming from an agricultural type background, which is how I grew up, I think of the sheep out in the field or the cattle out in the field, and they're running astray, and the shepherd or the cowboy, he's got to gather them up, which is, I look at Jesus as we all can start running astray.
Yeah.
And as we run astray, Jesus is calling us back. And he's going, you're dividing, you're running off the rails, you're going out and doing this or that. And you need to come back and get with me. And that's the way I look at Jesus as the perfect gatherer, is because we can all run astray.
Yeah.
I'm probably the king of running astray. And but Jesus gathers us back, and he's going, you're dividing over this and you're dividing over that. Did you get the shot or did you not get the shot?
Yeah.
And or are you a lefty or are you on the right?
Yeah.
Are you, and all this, and you go, wait a second. Or do you believe in speaking in tongues, or are you not? And I'm going, wait a second. Wait a second. You're dividing over some stuff you shouldn't be dividing over.
Right.
And that's the way I look at Jesus, is he's gathering us all back to him, and not all these peripheral stuff that we can divide over.
That is a great analogy. The shepherd gathers.
Mm-hmm.
The shepherd doesn't shoot the sheep, the ones that stray. The shepherd gathers the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good, Dean. Which of the images captured your attention, Dean?
Oh, I'm kind of like what you were saying. I'm kind of a hardware guy.
Oh, the Ace Hardware, yeah.
Yeah, I need to get a few of these kind of bolts and a few of those kind of bolts. And
So within that context, I think what comes to mind, we're not putting you on the spot, but what does being a gatherer look like at Ace Hardware? Other than buying the bolt and walking out, getting the right one. I mean, we want to do that, but what does a gatherer look like?
you mean, are you talking to me, or I go get the bolts I need and then get home and find out I didn't get the right ones? Is that...
No. I'm not talking about that. I'd say, is it valid that you and I are to be a gatherer within the Ace Hardware? What could that look like?
Well, to me,
go ahead.
it's our family members. I've got a daughter that's completely run astray, and I wrestle with what I can say to her as a gatherer to pull her back.
Good.
And all I can do is ask the Holy Spirit to guide my speech and my thoughts, because I can be a bulldozer sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's not the way to be. So I got to learn how to. I like this message today about being a gatherer, is I've got to allow the Holy Spirit to guide my speech and how to show her Jesus.
Yeah, you've hit a nerve that is very close to a lot of us. So that would be the upper left image of the family tension. There's a family tension, and how do I be a gatherer as being sent by Jesus within that context? You're exactly right. How do I do that? How do I win my daughter over, not to win, but for her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really good, Dean. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Other
A,
comments,
a,
folks? Yeah,
a gatherer needs to be able to see what's going on and understand it, and then take initiative to start resolving.
right. So I don't want to cut you off, Bob.
No, that's fine.
So within that, the gather, you identified the primary idea, which would be in all of these, is the idea of watching, of the idea of watching and intentionality in them.
Initiating something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
The question at the bottom, which area captures your attention? Probably all of these areas and more
Right.
capture our attention. I sort of view it sort of not necessarily which one captures my attention more than others, but maybe sort of concentric circles and
Hmm.
the your immediate relationships. So the upper left one, like family,
Yeah.
you know, is it's more difficult to be a gatherer there than it is, say, the marketplace, the supermarket or Ace Hardware is several bands, several concentric circles out
Yeah.
from what immediately impacts my life.
Right.
And I sort of look, you know, the spirit being given to us in a sense, I don't know where I'm going with this except to say I need more of the spirit empowering me as I come toward the center of those circles with the more immediate relationships in my life,
Yeah.
whether it's family or church or the workplace, that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, it's more challenging to me to be a gatherer.
You know, Steve, to me, I get so tired and weary of being criticized. It, I just, another blow, another blow, another, and it's hard not to get bitter, get fighting. And only when within this context, you know, there's times, Steve, where I want to say, shut the F up. I don't need to hear more criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And how, at that point, Jesus is present. And it means everything to me. We're not talking about academia here. I need the power of the Holy Spirit at this moment to just not explode.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can identify
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
The area that kind of hit a nerve with me was aging and how do we
Aging.
yeah, that you know, I'm finding myself not I find myself as a weaker, just overall weaker, not being able to do the things that I used to do, and it bothers me, and I don't know how to overcome that or graciously move within the realms of the confinements that I find myself entering into or happening to me.
Boy, that's another really powerful and applicable. I got a question for you, Carl. Within that realm, do you find that others around you are more sensitive of you and engaging and offering help, or less sensitive to you? I'm just curious. There's no right answer. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it seems like I find a little bit of a little more respect than I used to get
I
from
do
people
too.
around me because I'm aging.
That is exactly my observation, that the younger folks, they see me as aging and they offer help. 10 years
Yeah.
ago, that wasn't the case. But something in how I look or how I walk, um, I think the help is there. My challenge is embracing that help and asking the question, I'm okay. Why that? What keeps me from embracing the reality of aging? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think there's fear,
I,
fear there, just kind of down deep within us, and we we have enjoyed life, and now things are changing, and as those changes come upon us, we back away, we withdraw, we um, just struggle with coping.
yeah, yeah, that is so true of what you've identified is where we're all at within our, within our flesh. We're in that realm.
Yeah,
And being a gatherer is about, Bob used the term listening, how to still engage when my body is telling me I'd rather retreat.
yeah,
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Carl.
yeah.
Other thoughts, fellas? To put this on its flip side, and we've got just a few minutes, what are the advantages of getting older that you've noticed in relation to other people?
Life experience.
Yeah, it's certainly there.
When you work with a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds, you see life through different lenses.
Mhm.
And how to be gracious within that,
Yes,
not judgmental.
yes, exactly. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Again, the gatherer is the one who listens, doesn't judge, as Steve brought out, and initiates conversation together. I think the life experience we have is really valuable, and to share that with people in a appropriate and life-giving way is, I think it's kind of stimulating. How do we do that? I'm asking that question quite a bit. How do I, man, how can I be a life giver here? You know, a life giver, not a life taker.
Energy givers and energy takers.
Yeah, like we've talked about.
Yeah.
We either give energy or we take it. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think I experienced a little bit of a the opposite of a gatherer the other day when I checked out over at Lowe's. A young man had a bunch of tattoos on his arm, and I kind of questioned him or challenged him out. Why in the world was he doing that to his body? I mean, it's like, and it was kind of an interesting conversation, and he was very gracious to take my questions and
Huh.
not really get upset with me.
Wow.
He understood where I was coming from. I said, "Why would you why would you destroy your body in that means? And he told me about his girlfriend that had some tattoos on her upper chest here, and she had them removed, and it was quite a painful process. And I says, "Wow." He says, "Oh yeah, it's really painful, but she did it anyway." And
Huh.
so I guess it just those tattoos are like wearing the same shirt for the rest of your life. I mean, it's like,
That's good.
why do they do that to themselves? And I said to him, I says, these girls getting their legs all tattooed up, man, their legs are beautiful the way they are. Why in the world would they put the comic strips on them? It's just like, so it was kind of, I wasn't being much of a gatherer there, but
It sounds like, Carl, you got gathered.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate your honesty, and all of us have those stories.
It was,
We go into what the heck were you thinking?
yeah. Yeah. He was gracious to me. He was very open and he was very kind to my questions, and we left on good basis. And I thank him very much for his time of listening to me, and I just thanked him for that.
Yeah.
And so
That's a good story.
Huh.
Yeah, that's just great. Well, next week, fellas, I'm going to be on the road, but I'd like to try to meet next week from my truck. I'll actually be up at our camp, but I'll have it on my iPad, and we'll meet next week on Wednesday on the, we're still not at the end of the month, are we? Today is the 17th. No, what is today?
24th?
Oh, yes, we're going to be in the new, wow. Yeah.
July 1st.
It'll be July 1st. So we'll meet next week, July 1st. And we'll move on. Today we looked at the idea of being sent. And that Jesus promises or commissions his disciples that they are being sent just as he is sent. We've looked at Jesus. We've labeled that idea as he is a gatherer, and so we are sent as gatherers, and that's what we looked at this morning. Next week, there's 3 movements within verses 21 through 23. We'll look at the second one next week. So thanks for coming. Great discussion, guys, and thank you for your input. We'll see you next Wednesday. Bye for now.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Blessings on you. Yes, we just shut it up.